Betrayal, intrigue, mystery, and team dynamics. Those are the things that really shine when we look at Skeleton Crew, alongside its placement within Star Wars without becoming the Leonardo DiCaprio pointing me. With all this being said though, it does make me wonder if Star Wars is going to learn the right lessons with this show and what Star Wars in 2025 could look like. Welcome to Star Wars Uplink. Episode 6 of Skeleton Crew was a great character piece, and I feel like the thing that Skeleton Crew does really well, that stuff like, honestly, more recent modern versions of Star Wars, if we look at basically Season 2 of Mandalorian onward, Book of Boba Fett, for the most part, Acolyte, and basically everything except for Andor. Skeleton Crew does team dynamics very well, and also making sure each character shines and grows in the ways that fit that character. This is something that I think is very unique to the way that Skeleton Crew is telling its story. It is focusing more on, yes, there's an overarching theme and story that is taking place that has a lot of mystery, but more importantly, there is this dynamic and growth of these kids who are put into a location that they are not familiar with, and also in situations that they're going to have to make hard decisions. Through that opportunity, they're getting pushed to their limits, making growth happen. Story is often said to be where conflict takes place, and I feel like they did a really good job of, as a group, providing conflict to the characters, and also as individuals providing conflict for the characters for themselves to grow in their own story arcs alongside the story arc of the crew itself. So it does this really well. More so, I feel like a good comparison of Skeleton Crew on the opposite side is something like Acolyte. I feel like if Acolyte took the things that Skeleton Crew is doing very well and applied it to itself, we would be having a very different discussion around Acolyte as a whole. Because I feel like Acolyte did not ever focus on the team dynamics or the individual stories. It was more so around the whole of the basically universe and trying to set up ramifications for the universe as a whole, rather than putting that inward and applying those ramifications to the characters themselves. So I like to talk about it in that way. But it does lead me to wonder if Star Wars is going to learn the right lessons from Skeleton Crew. I feel like Star Wars as a whole right now is in this very amorphous place. This is a time for Star Wars to be in flux. It is both this thing and also this thing, two things that could be very different from each other. On the one hand, you have like the Mandoverse time period where they're trying to build this larger landscape for stories to be told within that is going to reflect and influence what reflect what the original trilogy has done, and also influence what the sequel trilogy does. In terms of the timeline further down the road. So they're in this very different place. It is like setting up a story like the Clone Wars in this time period in between movies, or Rebels in between periods, but without any like clear direction, because you have the character of Mando that was started off as like a Western anthology kind of like adventure of the week show that they then tried to tack on bigger scopes and ideas on top of. And I don't think let me put it this way. The best episodes of Mando are the ones where they are not trying to push this larger galactic view. It is the ones where they focus on the relationship of Mando and Grogu, or Mando and his place in terms of in between the cult view of the Mandalorians that he came from and the rest of the galaxy as a whole. Those are the big good episodes of Mandalorian. And the worst ones are the ones where you have the clear, just kind of like brute force introduction of characters that don't necessarily make sense for the broader universe within this time period. I'm looking at you, Ahsoka. Ahsoka is a great character outside of this time period, but they have so clearly tried to force her into this era that I think they've made a lot of mistakes in terms of gradually introducing her as a background character and then slowly bringing her up to speed instead of trying to make these big jumps. Mostly motivated because of the terrible decision to only have 8 episodes for these shows. I hope as we continue to get these spin-offs, because there are confirmed to be future-facing versions of live-action TV shows. We've got this confirmed from the top all the way down to the bottom. There are going to be more versions of TV shows on Disney Plus that are live-action going forward. We're obviously next year going to get Andor Season 2, which I'm very excited about. We're going to continue to get these things that build on top of the galaxy as a whole. And overall, I expect us to see more Star Wars going forward, of course. But I hope that they see the reaction to Skeleton Crew and the reaction to Andor, and they look at that and they say, oh, sweet. This stuff is working. This idea of expanding the Star Wars galaxy behind the scenes without huge ramifications, without trying to build up this universe that probably isn't going to work out very well, because things that I think the biggest example of things not working out well in this strategy that they're trying to play around with is when we look at the impact of Mando Season 2 and Mando Season 3, and the fact that the story for these characters not continued into this show specifically. They hop over to the Book of Boba Fett and continue that story. And many people felt very disappointed with the fact that they also had to go watch this other show, which had a varying level of quality per episode. So you have this thing, multiply that by much more. The people that watch the Star Wars movies, typically only a small percentage of those people watch the live action stuff. It's that funnel of Star Wars that we've all talked about. Like, everyone watches the movies, a fewer amount of people watch the TV shows, a fewer amount of people play the video games, and a fewer amount of people watch the animated shows, and then a fewer amount of people read the comics, and a fewer amount of people read the books. Like, that's kind of the path of Star Wars right now. And I hope that as we see Star Wars moving forward into the movies, into this larger scope of the galaxy, I hope that we see bigger focus on having the delta between the TV shows and the movies be bigger. I think that is overall going to be a better path forward, and I think things like Andor and also Skeleton Crew make a lot of sense. I think it makes much more sense for them to have this bigger gap in between the impact of the TV shows to the impact of the movies. And I hope that they realize this. I hope that the people in charge have enough foresight and 2020 vision to look at the impact of the stuff that they're producing, the variety of stuff that is going on, and also look at the reactions to these things. I feel like they did a terrible disservice to Acolyte in terms of how they handled that behind the scenes because of the bigger focus from Leslie Headland to make it a continuing ongoing series, the poor planning in terms of having that specific story that they wanted to tell only be told in 8 episodes. And I'm going to keep on bringing that up because I think 8 episodes is not enough amount of time for them to tell the stories that they're putting to screen in this use case. I think that Skeleton Crew so far, the pacing is incredible, but the pacing for every other Star Wars show except for Andor has been basically the pacing of a show that has 20 episodes, but only gets to about 8 of those episodes in that story. And I feel like this is probably from Dave Filoni's experience in doing like animated TV shows, and he just needs some more time to figure out the proper pacing for that. But I just hope that they look at this and they look at Skeleton Crew and they look at Andor and they look at the things that are actually like resonating well with a broader audience outside of the Star Wars fandom, that are doing something very unique in Star Wars, telling a very different kind of story in Star Wars. And they look at that and say, yes, we need more of that in the TV shows, and let's put the big blockbuster stuff into the movies. But that's just my opinion. Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear that, and check out our podcast. As always, may the Force be with you.